The morning sun cast long shadows across Fort Davidson as Captain Maria Santos adjusted her uniform and prepared for another routine day at the military intelligence facility. The base hummed with its usual activity: soldiers conducting training exercises, vehicles moving supplies, and the constant buzz of encrypted communications flowing through the command center. None of the personnel had any reason to expect that this ordinary Tuesday would become a day that would change everything they thought they knew about military protocol and hidden legends. At precisely 0800 hours, Sergeant First Class David Chen noticed movement near the main gate. Through the security cameras, he observed a figure approaching slowly along the dusty access road. The person appeared to be a woman, though her condition made it difficult to determine much else about her. Her clothes were torn and dirty, hanging loosely on her thin frame. Her hair was matted and unkempt, and she walked with the uncertain gait of someone who had been traveling for days without proper rest or nutrition. Chen immediately alerted his supervisor, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, who took one look at the monitors and shook his head. "Probably another homeless person looking for food or shelter," Rodriguez muttered, reaching for his radio. "We get them sometimes out here in the desert. I'll send someone to redirect her to the nearest town." But something about the woman's approach bothered Chen. She wasn't wandering aimlessly like most homeless individuals who occasionally stumbled upon military installations. Her movement had purpose, even if her physical condition suggested otherwise. She walked directly toward the main gate, never veering from her path or appearing confused about her destination. Most concerning of all, she showed no hesitation or fear as she approached one of the most secure military facilities in the southwestern United States. The base's outer perimeter was protected by multiple layers of security. High-tech sensors monitored every approach. Surveillance cameras provided complete coverage, and armed guards maintained constant vigilance. Warning signs in multiple languages made it clear that unauthorized personnel were forbidden from approaching. Yet this woman continued her steady advance, apparently unconcerned about the obvious military presence. Private Johnson, manning the main gate checkpoint, received orders to intercept the approaching individual. He stepped out of the guardhouse and held up his hand in the universal stop gesture. The woman paused about 50 feet from the gate, close enough for Johnson to get a better look at her condition but far enough away to maintain security protocols. "Ma'am, this is a restricted military facility," Johnson called out in a clear, professional voice. "You need to turn around and head back toward the highway. There's a truck stop about 10 miles back that way where you can get help." The woman didn't respond immediately. She stood perfectly still, studying Johnson with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. Her eyes, despite her disheveled appearance, were sharp and alert. There was something in her gaze that didn't match her homeless appearance, an intelligence and confidence that seemed completely at odds with her physical condition. After a long moment, she spoke in a voice that was hoarse but steady. "I need to speak with General Morrison." Johnson blinked in surprise. General Morrison was the base commander, a position that required the highest security clearance. The fact that this homeless woman knew his name and specifically requested to see him was deeply troubling from a security standpoint. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step back and identify yourself," Johnson said, his hand moving instinctively toward his radio. "How do you know General Morrison's name?" The woman seemed to consider the question carefully before responding. "Tell him that Eagle 7 is requesting permission to come home." The words hit Johnson like a physical blow. Eagle 7 was a code designation that he had never heard before. But the way the woman spoke, it suggested it had significant meaning. Military code names weren't something that civilians would normally know, especially not specific operational designations that could relate to classified activities. Johnson immediately contacted the command center, relaying the woman's strange request word for word. The response from the duty officer was immediate and urgent. "Do not let her leave. Maintain visual contact, but do not approach closer. We're sending additional personnel to your location immediately." Within minutes, the main gate area was swarming with security personnel. Military police vehicles arrived from multiple directions, establishing a secure perimeter around the mysterious woman. She made no attempt to flee or resist, standing calmly in the same spot where she had stopped, apparently unperturbed by the dramatic response her words had triggered. Captain Santos arrived on the scene as part of the security team's rapid response. As an intelligence officer, she was trained to assess potential threats and gather information from unexpected sources. Looking at the homeless woman through binoculars, Santos tried to piece together what they were dealing with. The woman's age was difficult to determine due to her condition, but Santos estimated she was somewhere between 40 and 50 years old. Her clothing, while dirty and torn, appeared to have been quality garments at some point. More intriguingly, despite her obviously malnourished state, the woman maintained excellent posture and carried herself with a bearing that suggested military training. "What's your assessment, Captain?" asked Colonel Barnes, the deputy commander who had rushed to the scene upon hearing about the incident. "Sir, there's something off about this situation," Santos replied, lowering her binoculars. "She doesn't act like a typical homeless individual. Her body language suggests military training, and she knew to ask for General Morrison by name. Plus, that code designation she mentioned, Eagle 7, it's not in any current operational files that I'm familiar with." Colonel Barnes frowned. "Could be an intelligence operative from another agency running some kind of test on our security protocols. Or it could be someone with access to classified information who shouldn't have it. Either way, we need to treat this as a potential security breach until we know more." The standoff continued for nearly an hour as various personnel arrived and assessed the situation. The woman remained patient throughout, occasionally shifting her weight, but never attempting to move from her position. She seemed content to wait, as if she understood that her presence had triggered significant activity and that important decisions were being made regarding her request. Finally, a black SUV approached the gate area at high speed. General Morrison himself stepped out of the vehicle, flanked by his senior staff and additional security personnel. The base commander was a distinguished man in his early 60s, with silver hair and the kind of commanding presence that came from decades of military leadership. He had led troops in multiple combat deployments and earned numerous commendations for his service. Morrison studied the woman through binoculars for several long minutes, his expression growing increasingly puzzled. He conferred quietly with his intelligence officers, asking questions about the code designation and reviewing security footage of the woman's approach. The general's body language suggested he was deeply troubled by something, though he kept his concerns to himself. "Sir, should we bring her in for questioning?" Colonel Barnes asked. Morrison continued to observe the woman, his mind racing through possibilities and memories. There was something familiar about her bearing, something that nagged at the edges of his recognition. But the connection remained elusive, frustrated by her altered appearance and the unexpectedness of the situation. "Not yet," Morrison replied slowly. "I want to verify something first. Get me a secure line to Defense Intelligence Agency headquarters. I need to speak with Director Walsh immediately." The call was placed through encrypted channels, connecting Morrison directly with one of the highest-ranking intelligence officials in the military. The conversation was brief but intense, with Morrison asking specific questions about historical operations and personnel records. When he ended the call, his expression had changed dramatically. "My God," Morrison whispered, staring at the woman with new understanding. "It can't be possible." The general's reaction sent ripples of tension through the assembled personnel. If Morrison recognized this woman, it meant her presence represented something far more significant than a simple security breach or random encounter. The fact that a homeless-appearing individual could elicit such a strong response from the base commander suggested connections to classified operations or personnel that went beyond normal military protocols. Morrison made a decision that surprised everyone present. Instead of ordering the woman to be brought in under heavy security, he began walking toward the gate himself. His security detail immediately moved to accompany him, but he waved them back. "Sir, we strongly advise against approaching without proper precautions," his security chief warned. "Stand down," Morrison ordered firmly. "I need to handle this personally." As the general approached the gate, the woman watched him with the same steady gaze she had maintained throughout the entire encounter. There was no fear in her expression, no surprise at seeing the base commander approaching. If anything, she seemed to be evaluating Morrison just as carefully as he was studying her. When Morrison reached the gate, he stood facing the woman across the security barrier. For a long moment, Neither spoke. The general searched her face, looking for confirmation of what his instincts and the phone call with Director Walsh had suggested. Finally, Morrison spoke in a voice that carried across the desert air to the assembled personnel. "State your full name and service record." The woman straightened her shoulders, and despite her bedraggled appearance, her response carried the crisp authority of a military professional. "Colonel Sarah Elizabeth Hartwell, United States Army Intelligence. Service number 847925634. Last assignment: Operation Eagle's Nest. Classified deep cover mission initiated January 15, 2018. The words hit the assembled military personnel like a thunderbolt. Colonel Hartwell was a name that existed only in the most classified files, a legend whispered about in intelligence circles but never officially acknowledged. According to all public records, Sarah Hartwell had died in a training accident 7 years earlier. Her memorial service had been attended by the highest levels of military leadership, and her name had been added to the walls of honor at multiple military installations. Morrison's face went pale as the full implications of the woman's identity became clear. If this truly was Colonel Sarah Hartwell, then her presence meant that one of the military's most classified operations was finally coming to an end. It also meant that everything the military community believed about her death had been an elaborate cover story designed to protect a mission of extraordinary importance and sensitivity. The general turned to his staff with an expression that brooked no argument. "Clear the area immediately. Establish a security perimeter at 500 meters. No one discusses what they've seen or heard today without direct authorization from me personally. And get me Director Walsh back on the phone immediately." As personnel scrambled to follow Morrison's orders, the woman who claimed to be Colonel Hartwell remained standing in the same spot, patiently waiting for whatever would happen next. Her long journey across the desert was finally coming to an end, but the questions surrounding her identity and the mission she claimed to have completed were just beginning to unfold. The base commander faced a decision that would have far-reaching implications. If this woman was truly Colonel Sarah Hartwell, then her return represented the conclusion of one of the military's most sensitive operations. But verifying her identity and understanding what she had endured during her years of assumed death would require resources and security measures that went far beyond normal base operations. Morrison looked at the woman one more time, seeing past her homeless appearance to the professional soldier who might be hidden beneath. Whatever the truth of her identity, one thing was certain: this day would be remembered as a turning point in the history of Fort Davidson and the classified operations it supported. The secure transport aircraft touched down at Fort Davidson at dawn, carrying a team of intelligence specialists whose clearance levels were so high that their names didn't appear on any public government directories. Led by Director Walsh himself, the team included experts in counterintelligence, psychological operations, and deep cover mission analysis. Their arrival marked the beginning of what would become one of the most classified debriefings in American intelligence history. Director Walsh was a man whose 40-year career had spanned the Cold War, terrorism conflicts, and the modern era of cyber warfare. He had personally overseen some of the most sensitive operations in American intelligence, including the original authorization for Operation Eagle's Nest 7 years earlier. If anyone could verify the authenticity of Colonel Hartwell's claims, it was Walsh and his hand-picked team. The debriefing began in a specially constructed room within the base's most secure facility. The chamber was electronically isolated from all outside communications, with multiple layers of security preventing any possibility of surveillance or interception. Only 5 people were authorized to be present: Director Walsh, 2 senior intelligence analysts, General Morrison, and the woman claiming to be Colonel Sarah Hartwell. Walsh studied the woman across the metal table, comparing her current appearance with photographs from her service record that had been classified for 7 years. The physical changes were dramatic. She had lost significant weight, her hair had gone partially gray, and her face bore the lines of someone who had endured prolonged stress and hardship. But her eyes remained the same, intelligent, alert, and carrying the unmistakable confidence of a professional intelligence officer. "Colonel, we're going to begin with basic verification procedures," Walsh announced formally. "Please state your full name, service number, and the authorization code for Operation Eagle's Nest." The woman sat straight in her chair, her bearing military despite her civilian clothes. Colonel Sarah Elizabeth Hartwell, United States Army Intelligence. Service number 8-479-25-634. Operation Eagle's Nest Authorization Code Whiskey 77 Alpha Bravo, Charlie 9. Walsh consulted a classified document, checking the authorization code against records that had been sealed since the operation's inception. The match was perfect, down to the specific alphanumeric sequence that had been generated randomly and known only to the highest levels of the intelligence community. Colonel Hartwell, according to official records, you died in a training accident on March 15, 2018. Can you explain this discrepancy? For the first time since her arrival at the base, Colonel Hartwell showed emotion. Her composed facade wavered slightly as she recalled the events that had transformed her from a living officer into an officially dead operative. Sir, the training accident was staged as cover for my insertion into Operation Eagle's Nest. The mission required complete separation from my official identity, including death records that would prevent any possibility of compromise. My family was informed that I had died, and a memorial service was conducted using an empty casket. The revelation struck the room like a physical blow. General Morrison, despite his preparation for this moment, felt the full weight of what the operation had required. Colonel Hartwell hadn't just been asked to risk her life for her country, she had been asked to sacrifice her very existence, allowing everyone she had ever known to believe she was dead while she operated alone in hostile territory. Director Walsh continued the verification process, asking increasingly detailed questions about Hartwell's background, training, and the specific parameters of Operation Eagle's Nest. Her responses demonstrated comprehensive knowledge of information that would have been impossible for anyone else to obtain. She knew details about the mission that had never been committed to written records, information that existed only in the memories of the few officials who had authorized the operation. Colonel, can you describe the nature of your mission during the past 7 years? Walsh asked, moving into the operational portion of the debriefing. Hartwell's expression grew serious as she prepared to share information that she had protected at tremendous personal cost. Sir, Operation Eagle's Nest was designed to infiltrate and monitor a network of foreign intelligence operatives who had penetrated several European allied governments. My mission was to establish a deep cover identity within this network and gather intelligence about their operations, objectives, and the scope of their penetration into Western intelligence services. The implications of her statement were staggering. If foreign operatives had successfully penetrated Allied intelligence services, it represented a security breach of enormous proportions. The intelligence that Colonel Hartwell had gathered during her 7 years undercover could potentially expose decades of foreign espionage operations and prevent future security breaches. Colonel, what specific intelligence do you have about these penetration operations? Asked Dr. Emily Chen, one of Walsh's senior analysts. Hartwell reached into the pocket of her provided civilian clothes and withdrew a small device that looked like an ordinary USB memory stick. Sir, this contains detailed records of foreign operative networks, their command structure, communication protocols, and evidence of specific intelligence operations conducted against American and Allied targets. The information is encrypted using protocols established before my deployment. Director Walsh accepted the device with the reverence due to intelligence that had been purchased with 7 years of a dedicated officer's life. The information contained on that simple storage device could potentially reshape American understanding of foreign intelligence threats and lead to the exposure of enemy operatives who had operated undetected for years. Colonel, can you describe how you maintained your cover and gathered this intelligence? Dr. Chen continued. Hartwell's response revealed the extraordinary nature of her sacrifice and dedication. Ma'am, I established an identity as a displaced American expatriate living in Eastern Europe. Over time, I was recruited by the Foreign Intelligence Network, initially for low-level operations but gradually gaining their trust through demonstrated capability and apparent disaffection with American policies. The cover required me to participate in activities that tested my commitment to the mission on multiple levels. The understated way she described her experiences couldn't hide the tremendous psychological and emotional toll that maintaining such a cover would have required. Living as a traitor while remaining loyal, earning the trust of enemy operatives while gathering intelligence against them, and enduring years of isolation from everything she had once known, represented a level of sacrifice that went beyond normal military service. General Morrison asked the question that had been troubling him since her arrival. "Colonel, why surface now? What changed that made mission termination necessary?" Hartwell's expression grew grave. "Sir, I discovered that the foreign network had identified and was planning to eliminate several American intelligence officers currently operating in Europe. The timeline for their operation required immediate warning to prevent American casualties. Additionally, my cover was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain as the network's security protocols evolved. This revelation added urgency to the debriefing process. If American intelligence officers were in immediate danger, the information Hartwell carried could be critical for saving lives and preventing the exposure of ongoing operations. Director Walsh immediately authorized emergency communications to alert affected personnel and begin protective measures. As the debriefing continued, the scope of Colonel Hartwell's intelligence became increasingly apparent. She had documented foreign recruitment methods, identified specific penetration targets within allied governments, and gathered evidence of operations that threatened American national security interests across multiple continents. Her 7 years of isolation had produced what appeared to be one of the most comprehensive intelligence packages ever gathered by a single operative. "Colonel, we need to discuss your family situation," Dr. Chen said gently. "Your parents, siblings, and your fiancé have all believed you were dead for 7 years. How do you want to handle reintegration with them?" For the first time during the debriefing, Colonel Hartwell's professional composure completely broke down. Tears streamed down her face as she confronted the reality of what her mission had cost her personally. Her parents had aged 7 years, believing their daughter was dead. Her fiancé had moved on with his life, eventually marrying someone else and starting a family. The life she had left behind no longer existed. "Sir, I understand that reintegration may not be possible," she said quietly, struggling to maintain control. "My mission required sacrificing my personal life. I accept that those sacrifices may be permanent." Director Walsh leaned forward, his expression showing rare emotion for someone in his position. "Colonel, your service has been extraordinary, and the intelligence you've provided will save lives and protect national security. The agency has resources to help with reintegration, including psychological support and assistance with rebuilding personal relationships where possible." The debriefing continued for several more hours as analysts worked to extract every detail of Hartwell's intelligence and experiences. Her information would require months of analysis and verification. But the preliminary assessment suggested that her mission had been one of the most successful deep cover operations in American intelligence history. As evening approached, Director Walsh made a decision that reflected both the value of Hartwell's service and the recognition of what she had sacrificed for her country. "Colonel Hartwell, effective immediately, you are reinstated to active duty with a promotion to full colonel and assignment to a position within the Defense Intelligence Agency that will allow you to oversee the analysis and implementation of your intelligence findings." The promotion meant that Hartwell would not only survive her ordeal, but would be positioned to ensure that her sacrifices translated into meaningful improvements in American intelligence capabilities. Her unique expertise and experience would be invaluable in developing new operational protocols and security measures based on what she had learned during her 7 years undercover. That evening, as the intelligence team prepared to return to Washington with Hartwell's intelligence package, General Morrison visited her in the medical facility where she was completing her final health evaluations. The transformation from the homeless-appearing woman who had approached the gate the previous morning to the composed intelligence officer sitting before him was remarkable. But Morrison could see that the deeper changes from her experience would take much longer to address. "Colonel, I want you to know that what you accomplished required a level of dedication that goes beyond anything we typically ask of our personnel," Morrison said. "Your service will likely remain classified, but it will not be forgotten by those of us who understand what you sacrificed." "Morrison," Hartwell nodded, accepting the recognition while clearly still processing the magnitude of her return to a world that had moved on without her. "Sir, I did what my mission required. The important thing now is ensuring that the intelligence I gathered is used effectively to protect other operatives and strengthen our security. As night fell over Fort Davidson for the second time since her arrival, Colonel Sarah Hartwell prepared for transport to Washington and the next phase of her life. The homeless woman who had approached the base had been revealed as one of America's most dedicated intelligence officers, and her return marked both the successful completion of an extraordinary mission and the beginning of a new chapter in her service to her country. The base returned to its normal operations, but the personnel who had witnessed her arrival would never forget the day when a woman appearing homeless had walked out of the desert and into military legend. Her story would become part of the unwritten history of American intelligence, a testament to the extraordinary individuals who sacrifice everything in service of protecting freedoms that most citizens take for granted. Colonel Hartwell's journey home was complete, but her service to her country would continue in new forms, ensuring that the intelligence she had gathered through 7 years of sacrifice would protect American lives and interests for years to come.